In 1949, Simone de Beauvoir launched the sexual revolution with her book, The Second Sex. This book, banned by the Vatican, deBeuvoir argues that we must craft women, and for that matter, man, as we would have them, not as we find them. In this episode, we explore the biblical imagination where woman's reproductive power links her to the primal creative forces. What does it mean that a woman's body mirrors the act of creation? How does the Torah and the rabbis interpret this? And what are the broader implications for gender and power? Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on your favorite podcast platform and now on YouTube. We also publish a source sheet on Sfaria, and a link is included in the show notes. This week's Parsha is Tzaria Mitzorah. The book of Leviticus introduces the laws of personal purity with the laws of childbirth, and we explore the unique perspective that the Hebrew Bible and rabbinic sources have on gender and sex. So, join us for The Second Sex. So, a few weeks ago, we did a personal care episode. It's only natural that we should do a sex episode. It was bound to happen. You know, I was thinking back to our Rabbi Riskin, and the lectures that he used to give at Lincoln Square Synagogue. And once he gave, before Shmuley B'Toach wrote a book that we might reference later called Kosher Sex, Rabbi Riskin gave a 5-part series, I believe, on sex in the Bible. So we are following a good tradition.
Okay, I remember those lectures. We all ran to listen to Rabbi Riskin.
That's right. It was a catchy title. So we are in Vayikra 12, and we have finished with the laws of sacrifices, and we're moving to the purity, the personal purity of human beings, of people. And it says, "Speak to the Israelite people thus, when a woman at childbirth," it says, "Isha ki tazria v'yalda zachar," bears a male, "she shall be impure 7 days. She shall be impure as at the time of a conditional of menstrual separation." So in prior episodes, Rabbi, we've talked about why is there a difference when you have a girl child or a male child. But I just got stuck on the first word, which is the name of the Parsha, Tazria. And Tazria is a kind of superfluous here. It says when a woman gives birth, it could say Isha ki v'yalda zachar. But it adds this extra word of Tazria. Fox, in his translation, says, at childbirth, Hebrew Tazria brings forth seed. Zera is the seed of something. If we go to Rashi, Rashi says, if a woman has conceived seed, Rabbi Simlai said, even as the formation of man took place after that of every cattle, beast, and fowl when the world was created, so too the law regarding him is set forth after the law regarding cattle, beast, and fowl that were in the previous chapters. So what they're doing, Rabbi, is they're saying, just as in Genesis, the creation of man and woman followed the creation of the animals, so too in Leviticus, a treatment of purity regarding men and women follows the treatment of animals. But in so doing, they really link what we're reading here today to what would be called Ma'aseh Bereshit, to Genesis, creation, the genesis of human life. And I think that is kind of fascinating because we're going to find that the rabbis focus on just this pasuk to talk about what is man made of. Is it the seed of the male? Is it the egg of the woman? This is the pasuk that they use as a launching pad to discuss embryonics. It's kind of interesting.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm ready.
Now, I noticed in Sfaria, they introduced a new commentary maybe a year or two ago, and it's called the Torah, a Woman's Commentary. And I look at it from time to time as I look at all of the other commentaries that we use, but I thought in this particular instance, I really should give it a hard and close look, because who better than women should be talking about the purity of woman, childbirth of women, the menstrual cycle. So they write Hebrew Tazria, which is the name of the Parsha. The verb refers to a woman producing an offspring. They too go to Genesis 1:11. It means produce seed or bring forth seed. In that case, it's regarding trees. The collective noun zera from the same root refers to offspring when used for persons. We all know about zera Amalek, the seed, the children of Amalek. To seed when used in agricultural contents. And they bring examples of women where the word zera is used, and they notice that typically in the Bible, when it talks about zera, as in zera, Amalek, and others, it's a male-focused term, but the truth is it is gender neutral. And then it quotes Baruch Levine, one of the scholars that we've been quoting throughout the book of Leviticus, and it says he translates the clause with Tazria as when a woman is inseminated. That rendering says this commentary by women, however, does not sufficiently highlight the active role of the woman in this parsha. So, Rabbi, let the games begin. We already
that's a very interesting little comment there.
Well, it's all, here it is. What they're pointing out is we are talking about the purity status of human beings, or Israelites, if you will, and we start with a woman. That needs to be recognized. Number two, the woman is doing something. Something is happening to her. She is anything but passive in this regard. So I give them credit for pointing that out to us. And again, so many of the rules that have to do with personal purity relate to women. So I like where they focus us on. I want to pick up a second on this agricultural metaphor for zera. In Psalms, it talks about let men sprout up in towns like country grass. There is clearly an association of mankind growing, rebirthing, and sprouting that the Bible loves to use. In Ezekiel, where it's talking about the politics of the state of the Israelites, and it talks about when you dwell on your own soil and they defile their ways and their deeds, that you became like impure, like a menstruous woman. So it makes the association between the perverting the soil and menstruation, and it talks about that my wrath is on you and you become scattered amongst the nations. Here, interesting, scattered amongst the nations, Rabbi, is v'yizru ba'aratzot kedarkam. You are sown like seeds around the world. That's the metaphor of sowing one seed, so to speak. And then on the flip side, when we come back to the land of Israel, it says, then you will dwell in the land that I gave to your ancestors, and you shall be my people. I will be your God. And when I have delivered you from all your impurity, I will summon the grain and make it abundant, and I will not bring famine upon you. So not so much is the focus today on just having food to eat. It's the rebirth, the regrowth on the land using agricultural motifs. And my favorite is the prayers. When we say in the Shemona Esrei 3 times a day, Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed, this is the prayer that has to do with rebirth. It has to do with Tchiat HaMeitim, of the dead coming alive, but it has in it this amazing phrase of Umatzmiach Yeshua, which is to give deliverance should sprout like a plant. So I think that this concept of giving seed, planting seed, a woman giving birth is not only a continuation of Genesis, but it's also a continuation of the future and the potential to be redeemed. So I'm setting the stakes very high as we look at this one verse and we try to understand how the rabbis understood this sense of birth and what it means, where the impurity comes from, possibly the difference between having a boy or a girl. So what are your thoughts before we start delving into the minutiae?
Let's talk about Mechal Kelchayim Bechesed, right? I mean, the fact that it makes it into the liturgy shows how fundamental. And it doesn't only make it into the liturgy, it makes it into the liturgy in the first two blessings of the Amidah. So I think Umatzmiach Yeshua, you're right. The deliverance to sprout forth. That's an amazing phrase. So that's great that we start off that way.
Fantastic. So the Ibn Ezra focuses on Isha ki tazria, a woman be delivered. That's an interesting translation right there. But he says, after Scripture concludes the law of clean and unclean food, it deals with human uncleanliness. The Torah starts its regulations of human uncleanliness with the woman who gives birth, because human life begins at birth. And I would say human birth begins with women. Many say that if the woman produces the seed first before the male, then she gives birth to a male. However, when the male produces the seed first, the result is a female. Mm-hmm. We will get to Rabbi Riskin's interpretation later.
Right, yeah.
We'll get to that later. But the point is that the whole definition of the child is defined at that moment of procreation and at that moment of birth. So it says, Scripture therefore states, and bear a man-child. And then he starts doing something interesting. And many of the commentaries do this. They start going into the science of the day. Mm-hmm. The wise men of the Greeks similarly believe that the seed is of the woman. The seed of the male congeals. All of the child is created out of the blood of the woman. Note the meaning tazria, to be delivered, means will give seed, for a woman is like the ground. So we're starting to characterize the contribution of the male and the contribution of the female. We're starting to characterize the woman as the ground, something that we saw a second ago. It becomes kind of fascinating. And we also start looking at science, because what they're trying to do is take this very biological moment and draw theological understandings from it. So Nachmanides says, with regard to the implication of the verses, the rabbis have said, and again he quotes this, the women amidst seed will bear a son. The intent of the rabbis was not that the child is formed from the woman's seed, for although the woman has generative organs like ovaries, like those of the man, yet seed is not formed by them at all. Or if it is formed, that seed is not thick and does not contribute anything to the embryo. The rabbis use the term she emits seed with reference to the blood of the womb, which gathers in the mother at the time of the consummation. He starts getting into and quoting the rabbis who are trying to understand who makes what contribution to the birth and the characteristics of every child. He says, for in the opinion of the rabbi, the child is formed from the blood of the female and the white semen of the man, and both of them are called zera, seed. Thus the rabbis have said there are three partners in the formation of man. The male emits the white semen, from where are formed the sinews, the bones, and the white substance in the eye. The female emits a red section, with which are formed the skin, the flesh, the blood, the hair, and the black substance in the eye. So it's fascinating. This is a color-coordinated explanation.
Right.
Anything that has to do with white is male. Anything that is red, and maybe when blood congeals, it gets darker, it starts to turn black, is the woman. Here again, the opinion of the doctors as to the formation of the embryo is also the same. In the opinion of the Greek philosophers, however, the whole body of the child is formed from the substance of the blood of the mother, the father only contributing that generative force that is known in their languages hylai, I would say catalyst. He is the catalyst which gives form to the matter. The reason I kind of quote these is that they all of the rabbinic tradition, and I would say even non-Jewish scientific mythological tradition, puts a lot of baggage on how the child is formed, and in how that characterizes the sexes, how it characterizes, he said there were three partners. He didn't mention God, the soul. This is a kind of a pivotal moment in understanding who we are. Before we open it up to discussion, in Genesis, the same Ramban who says it's not good that man should be alone, it says it does not appear likely that man was created to be alone in the world and not beget children, since all created beings, male and female of all flesh, were created to raise seed. The herb and the trees also have their seed by them. But it is possible to say that it was in accordance with the opinion of the rabbi who said Adam was created with two faces, male and female persons combined, and they were so made that there should be in them an impulse causing the organs of generation to produce a generative force from male to female. So, or you may say seed in accordance with the known controversy regarding pregnancy. And the second phase was a help to the first in the procreative process. And the Holy One, blessed be He, saw that it was good. That helpmate stood facing him. This is the meaning of what is said, I will make him a helper, otherwise to him. So what Ramban is saying, Rabbi, is it's spring outside and you and I are walking and we're seeing bees that are pollinating plants. Plants have both male and female inside of them. Procreation does not need necessarily different sexes or different beings. So Ramban here too is saying there could have been different ways. The way God wanted it was to have us to be distinct and then to come together. But it didn't have to be that way.
Right.
Fascinating. So this is kind of interesting. How important do you think? I mean, I think in modern terms, we don't find this discussion all that important.
Well, I was going to say that this is not a modern discussion. This is about creation. This is about what God intended male and female to be. The idea that du partsufim, that there are man was made with two faces, is an amazing idea, right?
Yeah. And I think what it does is where we kind of talk about this in terms of theology or philosophy or conduct is we to say, yes, we could have been one united, but so much about life is finding your other half, is uniting that which is broken. We do look at this and draw and extrapolate. I think those of our listeners who are into the Kabbalah, there's so much in the Kabbalah, whether it's the Shekhinah is the female force, or if you're tefillin, the long one is the male, the short one is the female. In many of our traditions, these gender definitions do have an impact. And I think what's fascinating is, number one, that Ramban is showing that there were other alternatives, there were other traditions. And I think you're right as a modern, but I think we'll find that the rabbis too took with a grain of salt what other people were saying, which is drawing very hard and solid, I would say, lessons from this. So let's go on a bit more. We are talking in our parsha. First, it says if a woman gives birth to a boy, she's impure for 60 days, and if she gives birth to a girl, it's only 30 days, and that's been a discussion that we've had in episodes past. But it does raise the question of what determines the sex of the child. So the Gemara in Berachot Barachot says, is prayer effective for that purpose? Can you pray, I hope my child is a boy, I hope my child is a girl? Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Rav Ami, said the tradition teaches that the gender of the fetus is determined at the moment of conception. If the man emits seed first, his wife gives birth to a female. If the woman emits seed first, she gives birth to a male, as it is stated, quoting our verse, when a woman emitted seed, Tazria Zera, and bore a male. From what are we dealing here? We are dealing in a case where they both emit seed simultaneously. So when can you pray? Only if. So I don't know if there are any other interpretations of this, but Rabbi Riskin, in that lecture that he gave many years ago, he was talking about when do they climax? And he was saying that the rabbis pinned onto this pasuk really a revolutionary approach to sexuality, where way before the modern psychologist invented or discovered the O-spot, so to speak, the rabbis understood that women had sexual needs as well, and whether they believed that that was a determining factor, or I think Rabbi Riskin argue whether they wanted men to be cognizant, men who they assumed would want to have to sire a boy, a male. Right. This way they would pay more attention to the needs of their wife.
See, that last piece is Rabbi Riskin's, that was his creative thing. That since men want boys, they need to be concerned about their wives.
So do you think that was his chidush? And let's go back a step further. Is this talking about climaxing, or what
I don't know. It was very creative on Rabbi Riskin's part. I don't know if it's in the Chumash or it's just in Rabbi Riskin's head. That's why Rabbi Riskin was so creative, because you're not quite sure. But it was a very creative idea.
Well, I mean, we're talking about the Barachot, what Barachot learns.
Right. Yeah, what it means. Right. But it's Brachot on the pasuk. Right.
Yes,
it's Brachot playing on the verse.
Isha Mizra'at Tchila. Maybe it has to do with, what came first. Did the sperm impregnate the egg? Did the egg impregnate the sperm? I got to believe, I couldn't find in any of the commentaries that they actually questioned what it meant. So I'm just going to go with Rabbi Riskin's interpretation of its climaxing.
Let's go with it.
And therefore, I opened up the book called Kosher Sex by Shmuley Boteach. And I wondered, what did he have to say about this subject? But before we go into what he's saying, again, I want to make the point that what the rabbis are doing here, if they're doing what Rabbi Riskin attributes to them, is they are not describing necessarily what they feel happened. What they're trying to do is lead the discussion. What they're trying to do was courtesy impact the way we live. And that becomes kind of fascinating because this is not written in stone. These are myths. These are suppositions. And it's really a question of how we take them and what we do with them. So Shmuley Boteach writes, under Jewish law, a wife's contentment is the key to sexual harmony, as sex is the most central elements of marriage. The Bible, in fact, records three fundamental unqualified rights of a woman possesses: food, clothing, and shelter, and conjugal rights, ona'ah. But only if either husband or wife withholds sex from the other over a period of time are they immediately dubbed to be mored or moredet. It is a cause for divorce. You can get divorced if either one of the partners in a marriage says the other one is withholding sexual relationships. This is because onah, sexual rights, is the essence of marriage, says the rabbis. And to withhold romance and sex is the cause of physical pain, food, destruction. So I think what he is correctly arguing is that in rabbinic law, there was a sensitivity, I think, way before its time towards the needs, the sexual needs of both partners. Would you agree with me on that?
I would agree with you on that. And that is more kind of the simple explanation, the pshat to Rabbi Riskin. Rabbi Riskin has a chidush. Boteach is just telling you what it says.
Yeah, because we all know, for those of you who have been to a Jewish wedding, you can also get married in 3 ways. Shtar, kasut, va'ona. You get married with a ketubah, that's a contract. You can get married with money by a purchase, by the transfer of ownership. That is the ring. And ona, if you notice at an Orthodox wedding, after the ceremony, the couple goes into yichud. They have to be alone enough time that if they wanted to, they would consummate the marriage. So this really is not a supposition, not theology. This is written into our rabbinic law and rabbinic texts. And I give Shmuley Boteach a credit for popularizing this, especially when 20 years ago when he wrote the book, it was still part of the kind of sexual revolution. People were talking about these things.
Right.
So I think that becomes fascinating. And what I'd like to do is to segue to this book by Simone de Beauvoir about the second sex. And it was written in the 40s. As I said, the Vatican felt it was threatening to the biblical concept of what the static roles of men and women are. What I was blown away with was that the first chapter in the book is, and I have a link to it in the show notes, it says Facts and Myths, Part 1, Destiny, the Data of Biology. That even in the 40s, Rabbi, you and I can say it's not a modern conversation, but even in the 40s, people were trying to define the role of male and the role of female based on the perception of how consummation, how birth, how a child is conceived. And what she writes is that the respective functions of the two sexes have entertained a great variety of beliefs. At first, they had no scientific basis, simply reflecting social myths. It was long thought, and it is still believed in certain primitive matriarchal societies, that the father plays no part in conception. Ancestral spirits in the form of living germs are supposed to find their way into the maternal body. With the advent of patriarchal institutions, the male laid eager claim to his posterity. It was still necessary to grant the mother a part in the procreation, but it was conceded only that she carried and nourished the living seed. This is this metaphor of haaretz. You just planted the seed. The man sowed the seed into the ground. She quotes Aristotle. Aristotle fancied that the fetus arose from the union of sperm and menstrual blood. Maybe this is what our rabbinic commentaries were quoting. A woman furnishing only passive matter while the male principle contributed force, activity, movement, life. Hippocrates held to a similar doctrine, recognizing two kinds of seed, the weak or female, the strong or male. The theory of Aristotle survived through the Middle Ages and into modern times. Then she quotes the Platonic myth, and I really encourage you to read the whole chapter. It's a PDF in the show notes because it's fascinating, because here is a woman who is trying to move us from ancient mythology into modern times. She pretty much quotes some of the stuff that our rabbis are quoting. And she says that St. Thomas proclaims women as incidental being, which is a way of suggesting from the male point of view the accidental or contingent nature of sexuality. So really, these did have an effect to the point where a book such as The Second Sex that would question that could throw all of these things askew. And she starts to talk about some amazing different ways of thinking about this. And she says, I can only suppose that in such misty minds there still float shreds of the old philosophy of the Middle Ages, which taught that the cosmos is an exact replication of a microcosm. The egg is imagined to be a little female, the woman a giant egg. So there is this, ontology recapitulates cosmology, this sense of what happens between the interpersonal relations between a man and a female extrapolates the whole Bereshit, the creation of the world, as our commentary said. She says the truth is that these notions are hardly more than vagaries of the mind. And here's where she starts to talk, and I think that her midrash is just fascinating. She says there are two interrelated dynamic effects of life. It can be maintained only through transcending itself, and it can trend itself only on condition that it is maintained. We may conclude then that the two gemets play a fundamentally identical role. Together they create a living being in which both of them are at once lost and transcended. So the male sperm is on the move, but it only can transcend itself by planting into the static seed. The static seed is static, it's not going anywhere. It can only transcend itself through the growth created by the sperm. She is obviously a French philosopher who is deep into the dialectic. But the point is, she uses this explanation and this kind of commentary on how the fetus is created to say the following. And this is how I would like to end. And this is the idea that I think Rabbi Riskin put into that rabbinic text, and that we are left one. And that is basically that it's up to us to draw our own conclusions from how we are formed, who are the authors of who we are. But in those mythologies, we are talking about creation of the world, we're talking about redemption, we're talking about where impurity comes from. Is impurity when we stop producing? Is a punishment when we just sow our seed in galut? All of these things become kind of fascinating, but I think the takeaway is that we start with, when we talk about human purity and human holiness, we start with the woman conceiving and giving birth, and then how we interact with that and how we kind of characterize that in terms of growth, which means moving from impurity to purity, impurity to purity.
It's fantastic. I mean, what you see here, you talk about Rabbi Riskin, Shmuley Boteach, and a French philosopher from 1949. And you see, they're really all sensitive to the same thing. And the source of all that is the Chumash. You can't beat it.
Chumash and ancient man. We study ancient texts because
and rabbinic tradition interpreting that ancient man.
Yeah. And we have the power, and I would say the obligation, to interpret it and reinterpret it.
Amazing, amazing topic. Fantastic, everybody. Enjoy the parsha. It's a double parsha this week. And we'll see you next week. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. All the best.